Welcome everyone from wherever you are in the world. Today we're going to hear from the ambassador. Ambassador Mulugeta Khalil currently serves as Consul General of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, based here in Los Angeles. He is in charge of Ethiopian consular representation in the states of California, Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. Before serving as Consul General in Los Angeles, Ambassador Khalil served as Public Diplomacy Affairs Director General at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Khalil is a long-serving career diplomat, previously serving as Ambassador Extraordinaire and Plenipotentiary of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to the Republic of South Africa, and Ambassador to the Republics of Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, Madagascar, the Kingdom of Lesotho, and Eswatini. The mission of the Los Angeles Consulate is to strengthen economic cooperation between Ethiopia and investors and business communities operating here in the Western United States, including those active in the areas of manufacturing, the apparel and textile industries, pharmaceuticals, the high-tech sector, leather goods, and agro-processing. The consulate is here to help facilitate their entry into Ethiopia to invest. And now, without further ado, I bring you the Honorable His Excellency Ambassador Mulugeta Khalil. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Invited guests, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon all. It is my great pleasure and honor to extend a warm welcome to all of you on this virtual celebration of the 125th Victory Day of Adwa. At the outset, on behalf of the Consulate General of Ethiopia in Los Angeles and that of my own, I would like to express my deep appreciation to all participants and panelists of this virtual meeting, which gives me a chance today. Adwa is the victory of all the Black people across the globe. In the month of February, we Ethiopians are remembering and celebrating each year the Victory Day of Adwa. This victory is an icon for the freedom of Black people to fight colonialism and free their land from the colonial power. February is Black History Month, so that we are so proud to honor this rich heritage. I would also like to say Happy Black History Month, Happy the Victory Day to all of you. Black people across the globe celebrate on one historical asset that occurred 125 years back in a small town in northern part of Ethiopia. The Battle of Adwa was a rocket booster for the inception of Pan-Africanism. This historic battle and the subsequent victory registered by irregular peasant army of Ethiopia, resonant across the world, has the first victory against a colonial power ever to be won by an African country. The victory of Adwa led the campaign of the Kingdom of Italy to expand its colonial empire in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is the only Black nation that beat out Europeans and maintain its independence and play a key role for the independence of Africa from the colonial power. The victory of Adwa is the most phenomenal event in the Ethiopian history that the African continent is so proud of. Moreover, history proves that the victory at the Battle of Adwa was not a victory only for Ethiopia. Although the battle was fought in Ethiopia, the entire global community of peoples share their outstanding victory against European colonial power that was thought to be invisible. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethiopia is the country in Africa that has never been colonized and was independent as it entered the 20th century, giving her people a large dignity and self-confidence. As you might know, Ethiopia was a source of inspiration and a beacon of hope and freedom for many peoples in different parts of the world. Furthermore, Ethiopia's story could be said to be the story of humankind. Ethiopia is a land of origin and diversity. It is the cradle of humankind and has many world heritages. It is a country endowed with immense untapped natural resources. I would like to take this opportunity to encourage all of you to come and visit Ethiopia, and you will be astonished by the natural and man-made heritage of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I wish this virtual meeting to be successful. I thank the participants and panelists once again. Happy Black History Month, happy Adwa Victory Day. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. To the point, precise, and nicely done. Thank you so very much. I do like to extend that sentiment and saying thank you to everyone who's here. Before we move on to the next thing, I have a quotation that I'm going to read to you all. If you know who it is that I'm quoting or who actually said this, if you know the name of the person, you can go ahead and put it on the chat, but this is what it says. An awareness of our past is essential to the establishment of our personality and our identity as Africans. Who said that? An awareness of our past is essential to the establishment of our personality and our identity as Africans. Who said that? If you know who it is, you can put it on the chat, and if you win, I don't know, you'll have a virtual gift or something. You'll win something. So moving on to the next thing, I'm going to introduce the next speaker that we have. It really is an honor and privilege to introduce him. His name is Dr. Salomon Dr Getahon. Dr. Getahon was born and raised in Ethiopia. He's a professor of history at Central Michigan University. Professor Getahon has written 4 books and more than a dozen articles on Ethiopia and the Ethiopian diaspora history. His books include, but not limited to, a history of the city of Gondar and the history of Ethiopian immigrants, refugees in the US. Professor Getahon is 2-time winner of the Blue Bright Award. And that award is given to a very, very smart people, let me tell you. The Blue Bright Award has 400 different types of opportunities to teach, research, and conduct professional projects in more than 135 countries. He is currently working on the history of political violence in Ethiopia, the Red Terror in Gondar from 1976 to 1979. Please join me to virtually welcome Dr. Getahon. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mame, for a very nice introduction. I appreciate that. And I would like to thank the Embassy of Ethiopia in Los Angeles, as well as His Excellency Ambassador Mulgeta, his staff, Sheikh Mukhtar, Mame, and my brother Meredith, and all others that I haven't met you. Thank you very much. It's an honor. And this is a very timely discourse that we should have, as we know where Ethiopia is now. So without further ado, I will start, but I forgot someone, a friend, a colleague, Dr. Shimalis. I see you. Welcome. I'm going to start my conversation about Adwa. This is an introduction. These are Ethiopia's rulers between 1855 and 1974. On my right is, these are modern Ethiopia's leaders. On my right is Theodorus II. Next to him is Johannes IV and Menelik II, and his wife and comrade, Empress Taitu. Then his grandson, Lijiyasu, who ruled the country for a few years. Then his daughter, Zewditu, who ruled the country for a few years. And then our late Emperor, Haile Selassie, who almost ruled Ethiopia for a half a century. These are our modern era emperors who have ruled the country. Of course, after that, we have the Derg, and then the TPLF, and now an emerging Bilzigana party, hopefully if they won the election. I'll move to the second slide. The Battle of Adwa. Before I delve into the Battle of Adwa, I would like to give you a little bit of circumstances for this battle. Italy was a latecomer in the colonial scramble for Africa. In fact, it just achieved its unification in 1871. Until then, it was represented by Piedmont and Sardinia, ruled by Vittorio Emanuele. So by the time Italy united, pretty much a big chunk of our globe had been partitioned among the major colonial powers, especially England and France. So some of the areas that were not occupied or colonized was Ethiopia. Then the Europeans referred to it as Abyssinia. By the way, there is no Ethiopian king or emperor who referred to his country as Abyssinia. Neither are referred in books that were written in the church, manuscripts, or in Quranic or in Muslim Islamic texts. You will not find Abyssinia. Probably you might find Habasha. Habasha, a name, something that is not synonymous with Abyssinia. So the Italians came and used this opportunity because Ethiopia was one of the very few countries that was not really coveted or it was not colonized at that time. So here is how they did it. A man named Giuseppe Sapeto was traveling, touring Ethiopia, and through him they were able to see that Asab, which is part of the Bahar Nagash territory, available. So an Italian, through him, an Italian company, Società Orbitano, bought a piece of land from Sultan Ibrahim, an official of that region. From there, of course, the rest is history. The Italians started to move up in the north. In the meantime, England and France, the arch enemies or rivals during the colonial scramble, were also in their own way, for one reason or another, were coveting Ethiopia. So the British came and made a deal with Emperor Johannes. The deal was not actually for them, but they're trying to free an Egyptian garrison which had been battered by the Mahdist movement, the Al-Mahdi in Sudan. They couldn't save them, so they came to Johannes and asked him for help, literally. And they sent their Admiral Hewitt, to Adwa, and Johannes agreed to let these Mahdists, the Egyptians from Sudan, through his territory, Karen, and then to Massawa, and then to their country. In return, of course, the British promised that he will have a free access and control of Massawa. He did, but the British, instead of honoring what they promised, gave the green light for Italy, who came and annexed Massawa. They did that because they have an interest on Ethiopia, especially in relation to the Nile Basin. By this time, Egypt had Egypt has become a strategic place because the Suez Canal had been opened in 1869. And because of the American Civil War, Egypt has become one of the major producers of cotton to the British industry. clothes industry. So they gave a wink because they do not want Ethiopia to control Massawa. They do not want France, who was now in Djibouti, as opposed to, the British are in Eden and the French are in Djibouti face to face. So they don't want the French expansion. So in a sense, according to my former professors, Egypt was used as a watchdog over these areas. Johannes saw that he had been hoodwinked. He was a very religious person, and the British, being Christians, thought that they would honor their word, but it didn't happen. So then, in the meantime, because he fought the Mahdists who were trying to make a peace with him, he didn't do that because they were Muslims. But now they sent their army and attacked him in the west. In the east, the Italians are crouching up. Of course, at one time, at Dogali, the famous Ethiopian warrior and patriot, Ras Alula Banaga, his right-hand general, beat the Italians at Dogali, but they didn't stop. They began moving up into the highlands because Massawa has no value without the supply and resources of the highlands of Eritrea. So Johannes has to fight in one hand the encroaching Italians, on the other, the Mahdists. So finally, what he did was he chose to fight the Mahdists, and he was almost victorious. In the meantime, the Italians, in the classic colonial fashion, approached Menelik, who was the king of Shoa. They said, Johannes is your enemy, and your enemy is my enemy, because Menelik had aspirations to be king of kings of Ethiopia, like all other regional or provincial lords at that time. So let's be friends, allies. So he will sign the Wuchali Treaty 1889. That year, Johannes dies. The treaty was a friendship treaty. Johannes dies fighting the Italians at Matama. There is a lot had been said how he died and what had happened, but I'll move on to Menelik, because by this time Menelik was the most powerful Ras or king in Ethiopia. So he proclaimed himself Emperor of Ethiopia, saying that I rather use the term Atse. Atse is or king of kings of Ethiopia. So he crowned himself, and now Ethiopia has become his problem. After coronation, he sent letters to European countries declaring that as of today, he is the king of kings of Ethiopia, and all communications should be sent to him, and his territory starts from XYZ all the way to etc. But unlike other times, no European power had sent him a congratulatory letter. He sent again, but he learned his one of his friends, the Italian, the Russian, I believe, Consulate, that he had been claimed by Italy as a colonial territory. He said, on what grounds? He was told that Article 17 of the Wuchali Treaty, which had been signed in 3 languages, Amharic, Italian, and just for safekeeping, a French one. On the Amharic side, it says Menelik may want to conduct his foreign affairs through the good office of Italians, while the Italian version says shall conduct. Using this classical trickery of European colonialists, the Italians claimed him. He tried to reason with the Italians. They refused. But there's an article that also says after 5 years, this treaty can be unilaterally abrogated or can be renegotiated or re-signed either by the two parties or unilaterally. So Menelik has to negotiate. In the meantime, has to arm himself. He also has to sort things in the north, because Mandesha Johannes, the son of King of Kings of Johannes, was logically the claimant to the Ethiopian imperial crown. But unfortunately, it didn't happen because Menelik had more guns and more resources. He couldn't do so. He was a little bit dismayed, and he even tried to approach the Italians. Then there comes communication from an Eritrean by the name Dejazmach Bahata Hagos of Akaluguzai, if I'm not mistaken. He sends a letter to Ras Mangasha, saying that if a white snake bites you, there is no medicine for it. But if a black snake bites you, there is a medicine for it. The black snake is Menelik, and the white snake is the Italians. So the gist of the matter is, let's unite hands with Menelik, who is one of us, and fight against the Italians. However, unfortunately, the Jazmach Bahata Hagos, on his way to meet Ras Mandesha Johannes, was captured, and the attempt to bring the two failed. Nevertheless, the Italians kept on encroaching. Finally, they controlled all Eritrea and began moving down south, marching. This time, Ras Mandesha realized that the Italians are not going to stay just in Eritrea, but they are encroaching on his territory, and they were approaching Adwa and moving south. So during this time, Menelik sent decreed national mobilization to all Ethiopians to accompany him, saying that meaning an enemy that takes your land, converts you to another religion, and takes your wife, is coming. Join me. That was the call. So all Ethiopians, from north to south, east to west, followed the emperor. I mean, King of Ethiopia. The battle didn't last long. What hadn't been told, however, was that if the Italians had stayed, according to some sources, one day, Ethiopian army could have disbanded, because there was lack of, there is no logistics, lack of resources. Not long ago, the country had been in terrible cattle, like the reindeer pest had been very much abundant in the country, especially the northern parts of the country had been decimated. So, but then an intelligence report came, one of the spies in Eritrea of Ras Abdullah Banaga, by the name Awu Alom, reported that the Italians are getting mobilized and marching towards you. With that information, Menelik alerted his soldiers. These are ragtag army. There is no army actually, professional army, but people, farmers, artisans, priestess, daily laborers, men, women, children, husbands, wives, literally everyone marched, accompanying the emperor to northern Ethiopia. These are some of the generals of Emperor Menelik. On my left is ተክለ ሃይማኖት of Gojam, ንጉስ ተክለ ሃይማኖት of Gojam. On my right is Ras Alula Abba Naga of Tigray, aka Wodi Kubi. And right next, so Nugus Tekla Haymanot was told to keep the left flank. Ras Alula was told to keep the right flank. In the center, Ras Makonnen and Nugus Mikael of Wollo, Ras Makonnen of Harar, and Nugus or Ras Mangasha of Tigray. And as a reserve, we have Empress Taitu and Emperor Menelik. At the right far corner, the person you see is the Judge Bahata Hagos. The other one is Balcha Banafso, the famous artillery officer of Adwa. So the war started in the in the wee hours of the morning, and the Italians were marching, led by General Matteo Albertoni. Albertoni's force couldn't last for more than 2 hours, and General Giuseppe Armond tried to help Albertoni, but it didn't work. So Albertoni was captured, and General Dabormeda tried to come to his rescue, but he was attacked by Nugus Mikael's cavalry and died at battle. General Baratieri, who was the commander-in-chief of these generals, saw what had happened to General Dabormeda, and he realized that Menelik was sending another supplement, another reinforcement, and he saw the writing on the wall and retreated. In just less than 6 hours, one of the modern militaries of Europe was completely annihilated. What does this battle mean for Ethiopians? First and foremost, of course, Ethiopia abrogated the Wuchale Treaty, and Italy unconditionally accepted this outcome. Ethiopia acquired 11,000 rifles, which was left by the Italians. Between 4,000 to 5,000 Ethiopians had been killed, 8,000 wounded. And with that, the world began to give attention to Ethiopia. Ethiopians were proud to this day, and with a sense of invincibility. When they go to battle, Adwa reminds them what they can do. For Europeans and Ethiopians, it was a sore point for between Ethiopian and European relation. I'll come why it is a sore point. For Italians, 7,000 killed, 1,500 wounded, 3,000 taken prisoners, including General Albertoni. When the news reached Rome, Rome University students took to the streets saying "Viva Menelik," and Prime Minister Crispi resigned within 9 days. For the Europeans, it was a shock because no African country had stood against European colonialists except Ethiopia. Their defeat, they cannot understand it. Some try to ascribe it for many different reasons. Some would say, oh, Ethiopia is mountainous. It's the mountains that have really defeated the Italians. Others will say, well, Italians are newcomers and they are weak colonial powers. It's no wonder. I mean, they are near Africa. We have to remember those days were the high time of racism. So the Italians, especially Southern Italians, Siciliano, were considered more or less Africans. So there's a war between two Africans. Some would try to bleach Ethiopia. Well, if you carefully look at them, Ethiopians are unlike the rest of Africa. But the reality is that the European invincibility was trashed. And Europeans have to this day, find an answer for that. There are two things after that had happened. August Wilde, Modern Abyssinia, wrote a book in that he said, this war should be a lesson to all Europeans, and no European should be defeated by a black. So everyone who goes to Africa, before it tries to embark colonizing part of Africa, they should really, really move carefully. The other one is Lord Thomas Buckley, rather. His observation is very timely because he was not party to the conflict. What he predicted, what he said earlier, he was in Ethiopia earlier, and he saw what he saw. He was in Ethiopia, and he reported his findings to the British Parliament, and this is what he said. I have traveled across the lengths and breadths of Africa. I haven't seen one person who is bigger, who is a beggar, who is a thief, such wealth. I have seen in the country such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I don't think we would ever conquer this country unless, I emphasize, unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture. For if the Africans think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them, a truly dominated nation. Lord Mackley's address to the British Parliament on the 2nd of February, 1835. Yes, we Ethiopians brag about Adwa. Yes, our land was never conquered by any foreign power, but yes, our mind is conquered. Our soul was stolen from us. This is a reminder to the current generation of Ethiopians, including myself, who were happy to speak English, who were happy to blabber in a foreign language, to show that they are far more advanced and civilized, and instead of looking inwards. And to those Ethiopians who try to solve Ethiopia's problem by taking Western, Euro-American, etc., theories and postulates and norms for an Ethiopian solution. Our failure starts because we are always looking outwards. The generation before me had even a song, Yenya mushra kuribacho bengilizenya anagracho. Our bride, be proud and speak in English. That was the measure of civilization for the generation before me and for my generation, and probably years to come for generations of Ethiopians. But we should be aware of this if we want to solve our Ethiopia's problem. The consequence of the Battle of Adwa. So here is a picture or a cartoon that depicts the victory. On my right is a Vanity Fair depiction of how Menelik kicked Vittorio Emanuele. On my left is the victorious Menelik, again on Vanity Fair. And on the one on the right is the Petit Journal. It's a French one. And then next to that is Vanity Fair, the English one. Is a sort of a caricature showing Menelik. It had an embedded meaning for those of you who have lived long enough in the United States. You will know what it means. On the right, the Rue shows Menelik, more or less a chimpanzee, and up the one where you see my screen. These are caricatures that were very common, that were made in the United States in 19th century and early 20th century, portraying, denigrating, dehumanizing African Americans in the United States. Yes, Menelik might be the emperor of Ethiopia, but he's not really. Look at this picture. You know, this is supposed to be Italy, and that reminds me Tarzan, who lost his elephant holding this poor girl, or I mean rather King Kong, not Tarzan, King Kong, holding that helpless, innocent, frail girl in the hands of the beast, King Kong, the chimpanzee. The significance of Adwa for Africa and African Americans. I wanted to push this one right here. Come on. So, in 1908, a group of Ethiopians came to the United States, and they wanted to worship their religion in a church, in the house of God. But those days, the house of God was also tainted with racism. Blacks and whites do not attend the same church. They were refused. Therefore, they established their church, Abyssinian Baptist Church, in 1808. I mention this because the kind of pride that Ethiopians have on their identity. In this United States, there is no other nation or African country that came to the United States, except the Jewish people, who are by and large, in addition to their country, Israel, are available throughout the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora. The only exceptional nation, in addition to the Jews, is Ethiopians. They have their own church everywhere you go, in every part of the United States. In some states, they have their own mosque. And Ethiopians are the only immigrant group from Africa, to say the least, who have their own soccer team. And I can go on. And that is what it means: independence, self-awareness. So Robert A. Young, David Walker published a pamphlet, Ethiopian Manifesto, in 1829. And these guys were members of that church. And in 2007, a delegation came from the Baptist Church, about 150, and celebrated the bicentennial of the establishment of the Abyssinian Baptist Church. The late Emperor Haile Selassie, when he was making a visit in 1953 in the United States, he visited the church in New York, and he gave them one of the most exotic crosses that everybody meets when she enters into the church. In Europe, among African Americans and Africans in the diaspora, Viva Menelik became a battle cry, a defiance against racial injustice among Blacks of the diaspora. A Haitian, Benito Sylvain, poet and traveler, co-founder of the Pan-African Congress in 1900, had come in 1903 when the United States sent a delegation to Ethiopia, and with him, William Ellis and Joseph Vitalian from the Caribbean came to Ethiopia. Marcus Garvey from Jamaica, who came to the United States, established the United Negro Improvement Association. And the song was, their anthem was Ethiopians Awake. And in 1919 and 1927, Ethiopian delegation came to the United States to congratulate the United States in its victory during the First World War, and for other reasons. So this delegation couldn't have a lodging, so they have to stay in universities like Howard and in places of African American houses and the church.
Dr. Getahon.
Yes, sir.
Can you give us maybe 4 or 5 more minutes?
Sure.
Thank you.
So, okay. So in 1931, Haile Selassie grants land to African Americans, and Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam, when Professor Gates asked him about Ethiopia, they both met in Ethiopia, and he said, when we saw Ethiopia in the Bible and when we saw Haile Selassie, we felt we found ourselves, more or less. That's what he said. Now, this is another one, Pearl of Ethiopianism, Signs of Unrest Among Natives in British South Africa. This is London Times as well as the New York Times. I wouldn't go through this blurb on this, so I'll leave it. When you have sometime I can show it to you. This is how Ethiopia was depicted in 1936 during the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, as opposed to the previous cartoon. So if we had been colonized, this would have been our fate. These are the Ethiopian Patriots who rose to the occasion when the Italians tried to avenge their loss. These are a group of Ethiopian Patriots from all walks of life, from all ethnic groups, from all regions, fought the Italians at many different, in Maicho as well as in many different parts. But there are 2 exceptional people. One is Abdis Aga, who was kept prison and who fought the Italians on their land, on their own ground. And then Zara Idris, an Eritrean-born Ethiopian who went to Italy, and when he saw that the Italians were mocking the Lion of Judah, he took out his sword and smitten as much as he can. And finally, he was wounded and captured and died in prison in Italy. African Americans in Ethiopia, this is a very interesting picture. In 1937, when Italy attacked Ethiopia, the battle was fought in New York City between African Americans and Italian Americans. Here on the center is a very famous boxer, an African American, Joseph Boro. He is also known as the Brown Bomber. On the right is the Italian Primo Carnea. These two were fighting a match, and the match was seen in New York, a match between Ethiopia and Italy, blacks and whites. So this match has an impact. And up that you see the first Ethiopian African Americans who came to Ethiopia to help and fight against the Italians. These are people who established the Ethiopian Air Force. And down there you see Ethiopia's contribution for Pan-Africanism. General Taddese Birru who was an officer of the Ethiopian police, is shown with Nelson Mandela, who came to Ethiopia, who had been given training and a pistol to continue the freedom struggle in South Africa. So the list goes on. I'll move.
1 minute.
Ethiopia is very important for African Americans. This flag that you see is the Ethiopian national flag. On my right, more or less all the colors are known as the Pan-African colors. The Ethiopian flag is called the Pan-African colors. These flags are Ethiopian flags. The Adwa has we have now another Adwa, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is as decisive, as historical, and a self-statement of Ethiopia's determination to defeat colonial era treaties, as well as to free itself from poverty and association, its association with poverty. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be answering them, be it how this Grand Renaissance Dam could be considered as another Adwa. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Getahon. Wonderful presentation, great background and perspectives. And again, thank you so much. It was a great, great historic lesson. And now, before we go on to Dr. Bonza, I would like to share a poem that I wrote called At a Sunrise, and it's exploring how Ethiopians might have felt the day before the battle, wondering if they would win, and then how they felt the day after they would win. So I share with you my poem, At a Sunrise. Our people hail from ancient times, before the earliest records of man, living and dreaming under the sun, in this sacred land. They dreamed of the future, holding high dreams for the generations to come, praying that they too will live their lives freely under the Ethiopian sun. But then the dark clouds of oppression came marching toward our land, threatening to bring misery and strife from a distant land. The challenge for us all is whether we can stand together in unity to dispel the evil shadow. Surely we can. We could never allow our ancestors' hopes and dreams to be trampled under the brutal feet of foreign invaders, drunken by imperial desires, with darkened hearts poisoned by the illusion of white superiority and starving from the endless hunger of greed. Tomorrow, when we awaken, will we arise to see that yesterday was not the last of our story? That despite the imperial dreams of others, our land remains free, free to savor the glory our elders held so dear. Yes, surely we can stand despite our fear. Morning after the great battle, we all rose to see that we're still free to live independently, the most glorious sunrise that could ever be, victorious, joyous, hopeful, and free. To our ancestors, surely they find no surprise that we live to see another free Addis sunrise. Cherishing the gem of freedom left by elders past, we continue to thrive under Ethiopian skies as we greet the most magnificent, victorious. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. That was awesome. And thank you to our presenter. I feel like I went back to history lessons and learned quite a bit. So thank you so very much. Hopefully you are able to actually share the presentation. There was a request on the chat for that, so you can maybe share something there. Before we move on, I also would like to let you know that we do have somebody that actually knew who the person was that said, an awareness of our past is essential to the establishment of our personality and our identity as Africans. That was Emperor Haile Selassie. So Joshua, good for you. Anyways, just because of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on with our program. We do have another poem coming up. This time, this poem is being presented by our Abid Alahon, who happens to be a member of the Ethiopian Public Diplomacy Task Force. He loves to write. He's very passionate about these things. So I'm going to welcome Abid Alahon. Please join me in welcoming him virtually. Abid, please unmute yourself.
All right, thank you, Mommy. Appreciate you. Hello, everyone. This is such a magnificent ceremony, just to say the least. I'm very happy to see our African-American brothers together. Adwa had huge significance for the global Afro community, not just for us. So this is a great event. And for the organizers, I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, including everyone. Mami, you have done such a fantastic job, not only here, generally doing a collaboration about African history and the Blue Nile, and furthermore, other things. So thank you very much. With that being said, a little bit about me. My name is Abby, last name Telefon. I came to America when I was 19 years old. I lived here for over 3 decades now. I can say pretty here in Los Angeles. I can pretty much say that I'm a native, somewhat a native, so I'm a product of two cultures. With that being said, I wrote, knowing that how significant Adwa is for the Afro culture, I wrote this poem, and I'll be more than happy to divulge that to you at this moment. Here we go. Adwa, an African victory. Victory to empower Black nationalism. Adwa to symbolize Afro-heroism. A colonial vice to support aggression, accosted with ancient civil sophistication. Ethiopia, the land of origins, started colonialist ill-gotten visions. Adwa victory belittled racism. Black unity to donate self-realization. A pitched battle victory in Adwa uplifted Ethiopian euphoria. Euphoria against colonial aggression became a benchmark for freedom rendition. The uncolonized land, Ethiopia, home of Afro culture and spiritual cornucopia. Today's Ethiopia, to only speak division, what happened to Adwa's unity and vision? Ethiopia is God's country, head to be bold, force be careful, chaos to empower your Lord. Ethiopia as a symbol of freedom, do not deserve violence to rattle her dome. Our past is calling for decency, self-awareness to elevate Ethiopia's story. Down to overcome our Ethiopia's dark skies. Adwa is our history, greatness to size. Adwa is our history, greatness to size. God bless Ethiopia and the United States of America. Abby Telefon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, so now we'll have some perspectives shared about the significance of the battle by Dr. Shimelis Bonsa Galuma. Dr. Galuma is Associate Professor of Africana Studies, specializing in modern and contemporary Africa at Stony Brook University, SUNY, New York. He was a senior lecturer in the history department at Addis Ababa University before joining the University of California, Los Angeles, where he completed his doctoral studies. Dr. Galuma received his PhD in African history, post-colonial formations at UCLA. So Dr. Galuma, take the stage, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meredith. Thank you for inviting me to talk briefly about this important historical event. So I will start by thanking the Ambassador Mulugeta, Sheikh Mukhtar, Mame, and Meredith, and so for the invitation, and greetings to all those attending this important celebration of the 125th anniversary of the Ethiopian victory at the Battle of Adwa. Thank you, Dr. Professor Salomon, for the wonderful presentation on the fascinating and inspiring story of the history of the Ethiopian victory of the Battle of Adwa. I will not say much about the battle. Professor Salomon covered most of it. So my comment will be very, very general. First thing is, why do we celebrate? Why do we celebrate the Battle of Adwa, the victory of this battle that happened some 125 years ago? So I think there are a number of reasons. Why we should celebrate the battle, the victory of Adwa. One thing which is very, very important, I think Professor Salomon made a reference to that in his presentation, that the past is present. The past is very much alive. And the memory of this battle, this victory, is not so much about what happened 125 years ago. It is so much about the present. So this memorializing the battle, the victory, the sacrifice, and the significance of this victory is about our present. It's about our future. It's about informing, shaping our present and our future. So that is a very, very important aspect of the Ethiopian victory at the Battle of Adwa. And that's why we need to remember and memorialize and monumentalize this history. A history which is not specific, which is not limited to Ethiopia, because this is a victory with global implications, with universal implication, not just for the Africa and for the global African diaspora. It is usually described as a victory of blacks over whites, but I think we can expand the meaning, the significance of this victory to also include people who lived in bondage in forms of oppression. So the oppressed, people who live in different parts of the world can also share in the memory, in this inspiring story of the victory at the Battle of Adwa in 1896. So that's one thing that I think we need to talk about when we think about when we memorialize the Battle of Adwa. I think there is this important context that we are celebrating the victory of Adwa, the 125th anniversary of this victory of Adwa. The celebration is taking place at a very critical time in the history of the world, in the history of the modern world. This month, for instance, this is the Black History Month, which is a celebration of African-American history, the African-American experience. And we are also celebrating another important global experience, the experience of Ethiopians in some 100 years to 125 years ago. This convergence, this happening of two important historical experiences, one a victory over Italy and another a story of sacrifice and achievement by our African-American brothers and sisters is very, very significant. I think there is one lesson from a celebration of these two in these months of February, and that is the interdependence or the interconnectedness of our historical experiences, our destinies and our futures. It shows the significance of solidarity, the notion, the idea of solidarity. That's why when we celebrate this victory, it is not just us who are celebrating this victory. There are people outside of Ethiopia, outside of the African continent, people who are members of the global African diaspora, people who live in the Caribbean, for instance, people in the US, here in North America, in the Americas, in Europe, in different parts of the world that celebrate this victory in 1896, because this is a victory of ideas, a victory of ideas of freedom, ideas of independence, ideas of equality, ideas of solidarity that we cherish, that are becoming very, very important today. So that's one thing. This moment, this auspicious moment is very, very important, that this is happening in February. The second thing that we need also to think about when we celebrate the victory of Adwa is this victory, this celebration is happening at a time when there is a global reckoning, racial and social justice reckoning happening in many parts of the world. We have seen these in the summer of 2020, not just in the US, but in many parts of the world, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. And what that shows, and this is also connected This is connected to the victory of Adwa, because as I said at the beginning, the Adwa victory is a victory about freedom. It's about equality. It's about being human and being considered dignified human beings with ability to determine and shape their destinies without interference from outside. That is very, very important. And that's why these movements for reckoning with our past, with the colonial past, for instance, with the legacies, the inheritance of the colonial past, is a battle. It's not just about the past. It is a battle about creating a world which is more fair, more equal, more just, more inclusive. Adwa is about this. That's why Adwa is and continues to be inspiring 125 years later. So again, the victory, the celebration, this 125th year celebration of Adwa is happening at a very, very critical moment, auspicious moment, I would say. I think any discussion about the celebration of the Adwa victory would not be complete without talking at least briefly about what led to this battle and what is important about this battle. I think this battle was caused partly by, we know about the economic rational, the economic reasons, the political reasons, but I think there is one thing which is very, very important, and something that also needs a reckoning, a racial reckoning, and that is this idea of difference. The idea, the paradigm of difference that define European Western relations with the non-Western world for centuries. When you talk about difference, this idea of difference has a very long genealogy, a very long lineage, a tradition that goes back to the 15th century, the 16th century. A lineage that is connected to the Atlantic slave trade and the trade across the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, and the Indian Ocean. A trade that dehumanized, or a discourse, a Eurocentric discourse that dehumanized human beings, and that justified their subjection, their colonization, their invasion. And the invasion of Ethiopia in 1895-96 takes place within this broader framework in which one region considers itself at the center of humanity, whereas the rest of the world, the non-European world, including the African continent, as a place of absence, a place of days and disease and danger, a place of subhumanity or lack of absence of humanity. So that victory, the Ethiopian victory, is a victory that rejects this assumption, this governing assumption, this paradigm of difference, that European idea of difference. So that is very, very important. So these contemporary struggles about our humanity, about our humanity today, our equality, this justice is a struggle that is not yet finished. So Adwa, when you talk about Adwa, the battles are won. The Ethiopians have been successful, but the war is not finished. The war for equality, the struggle for equality, the struggle for justice is not yet finished. I think there are a number of lessons. I'm not going into detail, but I think what are the lessons for this from the victory of Adwa? I think I can talk about briefly 4 things, 4 important lessons. One is the lesson of the need and even urgency for a global solidarity, particularly a global racial solidarity. I think there is a need for revisiting, re-strengthening, consolidating the ideas of Pan-Africanism, a Pan-African vision the Pan-African vision, not just for Ethiopia, not just for Africa, but for the global African diaspora, for people who live in the Americas, in the Caribbean, in North America. That Pan-Africanist vision that goes back to the time of Marcus Garvey, or even before that, to the 18th century, to the 19th century, the 20th century is very much important. It has become very important when we see what's happening globally in the world, when there is this so much need for reckoning, when there is so much inequality and poverty in the world. Meaning the meaning of Adwa would be lost if we don't think about, if we fail to think about inequalities in the world today, because Adwa is about equality, it's about justice. So that's one thing, I think that's one important lesson. Another is, I think we need to expand the meaning of Adwa beyond the ideas of racial justice, or the meaning, the ideas of Black racial solidarity. I think the Adwa victory speaks to the world, not just to the global the African diaspora. What does that mean? By that, I mean these ideas of freedom and justice for which people died, people sacrificed their lives in the 19th century, the 20th century. And in this particular case, in the Battle of Adwa, are very much relevant today. So there is this possibility for reimagining, reinventing the world, because this is the world we created. This is the world humans created. The world we have today is a product of human imagination. The problem is we're not part of that imagination that created a world that is not equal, that's not fair, that's not free.
30
but
seconds.
We can reimagine and reinvent the world on foundations of justice and freedom and the equality and radical empathy. It is very, very important. I think this is one of the biggest lessons of the victory at the Battle of Adwa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shimelis Goma. Boy, it was so captivating. I wish we had more time and we can just listen to you. Bottom line, solidarity, bottom line, unity, bottom line, Adwa is far reaching than just the Adwa and just Ethiopia and Pan-Africa, because it does represent a bigger picture, so before I move on, I'm gonna go ahead and read a very, very strong statement, at least to me, based on solidarity and based on unity. So it says, until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, until there are no longer first-class and second-class citizens of any nation, until the color of man's skin is no more than significant than the color of his eyes, until the basic human rights are equally granted to all without regard to race. Until that day, the dream of lasting peace, world citizenship, and the rule of international morality will remain but a fleeting illusion, to be pursued but never attained. This was said like so many years ago, it's just so powerful. And once again, it was said by Emperor Haile Selassie for the record. I don't know why I was looking up some stuff today, but from all the speakers, the poems and everything, there is a trend here, and the trend is unity, solidarity. As we celebrate Adwa, there is more to it than a war being won, right? I read an article that said when Ethiopia stunned the world, because the battle was won in 6 days, and no one has done that, I guess, at that time, but in the way it's done and all the different things that we've heard. So without further ado, here's what we're going to do. The chat has been really good. People are appreciative. Obviously, the presenters have done an awesome job. It's been captivating. Thank you for everybody's time and patience in doing this. What we're going to do right now is maybe give an opportunity to our audience, see if you have any questions you would like to pose to our speakers, the ambassador, anyone, or even maybe making a comment. If there is no question at all to the presenters, I suspect there might be some, and I already see a hands up. Dr. Malako, you're the very first one. As soon as I'm done talking, I will come to you. You could put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and hopefully I can see everyone. I cannot see everyone that's in the chat, but hopefully I should be able to see it.
And this topic is relating to the presentations and
Yes.
The topics of today.
The topics of today and what we've heard. I can tell you, I picked up certain things that's resonating with me. Ethiopia has always been a coveted country, and it still is. We have amongst us U.S. Africa Opportunity Network. We have several people with us. We have the international community with us. So this celebration is truly a representation of what Adwa should stand for. And it's not just about a given place, a given thing. Yes, it is, but it does represent it. Like I said, it is far reaching than a battle like that being won. The victory of Adwa, rather, was not obtained without a sacrifice. And today, as we think about the victory and how they must have felt at that time, we also have to think about the sacrifices that was made for all of us to be here today and for the history to be the way it is today. About, from what we've heard, 4,000 to 8,000 lives were lost. I'm sure there's probably more than that, but as we sit here and we get all encouraged and we have that Ethiopian pride, that African pride, whatever you name it, we'll talk about solidarity, we talk about unity. It isn't without sacrifice, and sacrifice continues to be made. So with that said, we're going to start with Dr. Malaku. I'm going to take a minute and switch gears and speak in one other language for a second, because there was a message in the chat as to why we're doing this in English and not in Amharic. So ይቅርታ በጣም ይቅርታ። ያው እንደምታውቁት ብዙ ሰው ስላለ መካከላችን ከአክብሮት ጋራ ከይቅርታ ጋራ በእንግሊዝኛ ያደረግነው ቋንቋችንን የማይችሉ ሰዎች ስላሉ ነው። ስለዚህ I hope ትታገሱናላችሁ. Thank you so very much. So የአማርኛው ደግሞ ይኖራል አይደል አቶ?
Next week, yeah.
Yes, just explaining to you, to people, why we were focused on speaking in English and not necessarily in Amharic today. And there will be another celebration coming up next week. So moving on to the questions, Dr. Malaku, please.
Okay, thank you, Mami, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Malaku Teshoma. I live in Portland, Oregon. My question is to Mr. Bill. As far as you know, how is the history of Adwa being taught in school? Mr. Bill or the other guests are here. I mean, I know we do celebrate this. Actually, like my brother, Dr. Shimalis mentioned, that it does a kind of, it converges with the Black History Month. I'm not sure how familiar some of the students are. I don't know if you can really elaborate on that. And to the point that I guess Dr. Shimalis mentioned, something to the effect that, you know, what is a lesson being learned? To me, is really we do celebrate the same thing with the birthday of Dr. King. So what is it that we learn? So I think to me what we learn is, I think also Dr. Salomon mentioned that exactly as our current Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, said, you know, he doesn't really like any of the important ideas because those never worked. It's been proven time and again. So he has his homegrown economic reform, which is really attempting to really to transform the nation from its agrarian, poverty-ridden to a more middle-class economy. So I think what the lesson should be is what is it being learned, and those are the kind of really indications that when leaders adopt, you know, their own sort of a homegrown, something indigenous, then I think that is really the idea. So any one of you can comment, and thank you.
All right. Thank you, Malaku. Just to preface it, I grew up in Los Angeles. So I grew up under the American education system, which had nothing about that and barely had anything of substance about the history of people of African descent, particularly before the 60s and 70s. So I was born in 1953. So that was my reference point. Now, during the civil rights struggle of the 60s, we were very attuned to the activities of Kwame Nkrumah and Nelson Mandela and Patrice Lumumba and the freedom fighters on the continent. And that was our connection as the students who were coming up. So we had to learn on our own. Now, fortunately today, due to organizations like the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations that has been around for decades, they have been, that collective of African-American scholars and African Caribbean scholars has done much to inform the African American communities in the U.S. One of the things I'm also concerned about is what is being taught in the schools on the continent. So most of the education systems are legacy to some of the colonial masters. And I think it's really important that the African Union look at the content. You know, what are they teaching 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds about the history of the world from an African perspective? So nothing was taught to us. We had to learn on our own. And so, you know, that's my response.
Thank you for that. Any response from our guest speakers today?
I'm sorry to say, but I left Ethiopia a long time ago, and I don't know what they teach in the elementary and the high schools. The last time I was at Addis Ababa University, history program was almost gutted down, and it was morphed into heritage something studies. The reason given was that Ethiopia needs more scientists, etc., etc. So the department has less students, and I think Dr. Gulma knows more about that than I am. So I leave the floor for him.
Any comments from you, Dr. Gulma? You're on mute.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would say, I mean, my answer would be very, very general, not specific to Ethiopia. But I share Mr. Meredith's assessment about education, especially the education of history, both in the African continent and today. I think there is a problem with the teaching of history, especially Black history, both in Africa and outside of the African continent, here in the US, for instance, or in the Caribbean. And there is the problem is this one-dimensional story. The Nigerian writer Adichie talks about the danger of a single story. There is a danger of a one-dimensional story about Africa, a story that a story that doesn't say much about the achievements of the African continent. There is this African history, and the teaching of African history is a problem, is a victim, of selective memory. By selective memory, meaning selectively remembering and selectively forgetting. There are things that we don't remember deliberately, and there are things that we remember deliberately. So there is a need for a re-analysis of African history, a relearning of African history. I think the beginning of learning about Africa begins with unlearning about Africa, unlearning about what we learned in the school system, for instance. So I think there is a very interesting book by a Kenyan writer. It's called Decolonizing the Mind. Decolonizing the Mind. I think in Africa in general, but also outside of Africa, there is a need for a new phase of decolonization. A different kind of decolonization is needed because Africa's independence is not complete, and they cannot be complete without claiming our ability to tell our own stories, without claiming our ability to produce our own knowledge, including our historical knowledge. Because knowledge production is not innocent, it is political also. There's always a politics of knowledge production. So if we don't have that ability, then we will be prisoners of a story someone has written. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Learn or unlearn. That's very powerful, right? There are some things that we do need to unlearn about Africa, and there are some things that we do need to learn, like some stuff that we've learned today. That's the most powerful thing that anyone should know. But yeah, Decolonizing the Mind, I will go get it today. That's a very powerful book. I've heard about it. So hopefully you guys can go find it too. Please unmute yourself, Mr. Tim.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I am honored and proud to have had the invitation from Ambassador to join this. It's a wonderful celebration. I've been going to Ethiopia now for the last 22 years, primarily doing study and documentaries. I was there just before the lockdown. I just come back from Ethiopia when they told us we could no longer travel, which has broken my heart. I'm doing a documentary film on John Robinson, the Black American pilot who was part of the Second War. I just want to say that since this is a celebration, we should also celebrate something about Ethiopia that I find unique. And that is, it's one of the few countries that I travel in the world where people see themselves primarily as conquerors and not victims. We've been indoctrinated throughout the African diaspora to see ourselves in a victim mode because we've been programmed that way through the propaganda. And if I could, I just want to share one thing with you that I don't even, whenever I share this, most Ethiopians are not even aware. But the Ethiopian courage goes way back beyond Adwa. It goes back even in this country. The first battle won during the War of Independence in America was fought and won by Ethiopians. Let's see if I can share this just for you to see. If you come to the Museum of African American History here in Washington, the new one, you will find this. In 1775, the Battle of Kemp's Landing, an Ethiopian regiment overtook patriotic militiamen. And that was the first battle that was won in the War of Independence. So Ethiopians have in Korea during the battle, the Korean conflict in 51, the majority of soldiers who outnumbered even the American troops were Ethiopians. And are still many there. So Ethiopians and the spirit of Ethiopia is the thing that I'm trying my best to spread through my documentaries on my TV channel that we've just launched, because that is what's missing, I think, in the African diaspora, wherever we are. That sense of victimization has to be rooted out of us. We have to see ourselves as conquerors. We have to see ourselves as the warriors that we have to be to change the world that we live in. So I just wanted to make that statement and say I'm really pleased and honored to be a part of this. And the Ethiopians, that's the first time I've ever traveled to an African country, and I've been throughout many, where when I hit the ground, I just felt like I'm not a victim here. Mm-hmm. This is homeland, and I see that in the stories that when I travel there, and I'm honored to be a part of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to have you amongst us, and thank you for all the work that you do to put the history and the story of Africans on the map. That really was nice. We owe it to the next generation to also educate and let them know and never forget. I think we have the responsibility and the obligation to also pass that Ethiopian courage, as you put it, to the next generation and not to be lost. So thank you. I'm going to begin with Prince Sefa Boka, and then Mr. Salomon Seyum, and then Abi, if that's okay. Then we will wrap up. So if we could just maybe formulate our questions kind of briefly, or if you're making a statement, say so. And then if you want to direct your questions to specific somebody, do so. And then that way we will save some time. My bad, I apologize, Dr. Jill. So would it be okay, Prince, to have Dr. Jill go first, if you wouldn't mind, please? And then I'll come to you.
Yes, I wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I apologize, Dr. Jill, and welcome back from Ethiopia. You brought the sun with you. You look beautiful. Go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Consulate. So my question is this. A couple of things. One, I had an opportunity to be a scholar a couple of years while I was teaching in Ethiopia at Bahardar University, as well as Arbor Mensch University.
Kind of hard to hear you. Can you go a little louder or up your volume?
My throat's kind of, is that better for you?
It's a little better.
So I had an opportunity to teach as a visiting scholar at both Arbor Mensch and Bahar universities a couple of years ago. So I've had hands-on experience within Ethiopia's higher education system. And so I will say that I know that there are some initiatives to try to address the issue of the lack of, I think, inclusion or representation of Pan-Africanism. I know that the continuing dialogues and conversations that I'm having is attempting to bring curriculum from our Black scholars here in the diaspora directly to folk on the ground. That's the first thing. Then the second question is for this, anyone who would like to address it. Empress Taitu, who was the married to King Menelik, in the historical record, it says that she was a military strategist and that he in fact conferred with her often, right, before moving forward with negotiations. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about the role of Empress Taitu. I learned this while I was living in Ethiopia, just how significant she was to Ethiopia, and particularly during the military battles of Adwa. And then how did her influence, right, impact the second attempt by Italy to attack Ethiopia? There were women, Ethiopian women, who played a major role both in the rural areas fighting against Italians. And so specifically Maza Mengistu's book called The Shadow King focuses on this historic role of Ethiopian women. So if someone could speak a little bit more in detail about the role of Ethiopian women in military strategies, I'd like that. Thank you.
Presenters, anyone in attendance?
Okay, Dr. Gia, welcome back again. I met you before you left for Ethiopia. I don't know, but I guess it goes with the ongoing trend that really the focus has been towards really men. And you're right. I did attend the presentation by Maaza, I don't remember her last name, The Shadow something, the book you mentioned. And there are, in fact, yes, and in fact, there are women who really participated during the war. And I think Taitu, Princess Taitu, she's right. And she actually said that instead of, she said, I don't know the exact phrase, but she said, I hate war. But instead of agreeing to this agreement, which was really, was worded incorrectly, she said, I would rather go to war. And so she accepted the war instead of really signing this agreement. And that's how actually she lead about what, 6,000 or 5,000 army alongside with her husband, King Menelik. So, and which means, by the way, that there are other women who did a similar thing to some degree, but they're kind of nameless. And maybe as we go forward, I think history will reveal that there were actually more women than we thought during the war.
Thank you, Dr. Malako. Anyone else?
Is it me or anyone else?
Well, it's you now.
It's you,
We are hearing you. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I agree with I think Dr. Malako said there were women, many women. Empress Taitu played a very decisive role in the battle, in the victory eventually. I don't think the problem is not the absence of women in the war effort, because there are so many women who were fighting in the battles before and after Adwa. But the problem is the invisibility of women, or the lack of visibility of women in the historiography of war, because many a time those who are writing the stories are not women, and so their absence, their historiographical absence, their absence in the historiography, in the literature, in the books, is a problem. Not that they are absent in the wars. They fought, they died, they sacrificed, and the success of Adwa would not have been complete, or it would not have happened without the contribution of women. So what we need is gender. So gendering history, gendering the writing of history is very, very important, so that we can place them not on the margin of history, including the history of war, but at the center, because they are in the center. The other question is very, very important. You were talking about curriculum. I think you were talking about courses, the courses. I think there is a need. There is a need to intensify the Africanization of knowledge production and teaching, including teaching history, because we need to have this interdependence in the production and in the writing of our histories, because our histories are so interconnected. meaning the history of anti-colonialism in Ethiopia is very much connected to the history of anti-colonialism, the fight against colonialism in neighboring countries in Sudan or across the Atlantic in the Caribbean. There is so much, very deep parallel, for instance, parallel between the Ethiopian military victory at the Battle of Adwa and the victory of Haiti over France in 1804. These are two important victories with global implications, one in Africa, another in the Caribbean, in Haiti. And talking about one of these victories probably would not be complete without talking about the other. So to say a more complete story about Haiti, the Haitian victory over France in 1804 probably needs to say something about the Ethiopian victory over Italy in 1896. So that kind of transnationalization of our history writing, our history knowledge production is important. So that's a very good point.
Thank you for that response too. Thank you for the question as well as the responses. So we can get to everyone. I would really like to move on. The problem is the absence of records, historical records of women's participation in these battles and the history of Africa altogether. And it is very disconcerting. Just listening to you guys, I was thinking about the storytellers. That's how a lot of the stories were told. Stories were told and not necessarily captured in the way that some other things are captured anyway. So just to save some time, I'm gonna go ahead and now have
thank you everyone for the presentation. Quick shout out, Mr. Reed. I have to say I love you from Sister. So it's just a great honor to see you right now on Zoom call. I'm kind of like a little jittery, so to see you talking about Ethiopia is amazing. So good evening to you, sir. And also just a quick shout out to Mr. Beal. And also I have a question for you. And my question is this: I'm part of the generation, I'm part of the millennial generation of the African diaspora. And I'm sure that we are kind of aware of what's going on in regards to Africa and sovereignty. And the African diaspora, from the US and on, do want to help like African nations. But how can we help African nations without impeding on their sovereignty? It's great that we hear that Ethiopia was the first nation not to be colonized. They were able to establish their sovereignty. That's wonderful. And yet these other African nations did not have that opportunity to become independent. And now we are basically, you have African nations, from Ghana and whatnot, who are now independent, but now we have these African diasporas who want to, help these African nations, but at the same time, we don't want to impede on their sovereignty. The reason why I say that, because what comes to mind is Afrochella. I don't know if you heard the story about, my goodness, it was a celebrity, and I forget her name right now, but there was a celebrity who came to Ghana, and she was expected to play. It will come to me, but I think the mistake is I want to be sure that people like myself, the generation who do want to help African nations, what can we do, or what mistakes that we should not make when we try to help African nations without impeding on their sovereignty? Mr. Beal.
Well, that's a very good question, because there's a book called Dead Aid, DEAD, and it's addressing the donor community and this notion of Africa needing their help to fix Africa's problems. And I was with a finance minister of one of the African nations, and he mentioned his perspective is that Africa are the donors, meaning we allow our resources to leave our shores, and the value addition is put on the other side. So, for example, you're farming cocoa, and you're exporting raw cocoa to Europe, and then they process it on the other side and make chocolate, or they take gold out of Ghana and send it somewhere and processes it into gold bars. So that extra value addition is a donation from African people, the African continent, to Europe in that respect. So one of the things that a number of countries are doing is looking at doing that value add on the African side. For example, Senegal discovered some oil recently, and now there's a discussion between 3 African countries about creating refineries for them. The president of Ghana recently talked about the power of the African diaspora, and it is the wealth of the African diaspora coming back, reinvesting in Africa and returning the wealth that was stolen from Africa. So more specifically, my young brother, it's sharpening your skill set, your knowledge set. Entrepreneurship, there's no jobs almost anymore. So entrepreneurship and leveraging the tools of innovation and technology, whether you're here or on the continent, it doesn't matter. I do encourage everyone who living in the United States, you have to go outside the United States at least once to understand what's going on. And if you can at all, it would be great to go yourself to Africa, anywhere there, just to see what it's like yourself from the other side. But I've met young men. I moved to Nairobi in 2011. In September will be my 10-year anniversary, and I met a young man who was suffering from dysentery. He wound up starting a bottled water company. And at the time I met him, he had just sold his 100,000th bottle of water. I've met all kinds of young entrepreneurs who are—
Can you wrap up, please? Thank you.
Yes, are just creating, all kinds of advancements. So one is learn as much as you can, travel as much as you can, and create as many relationships as you can. So I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say a couple of things too for the same question, and I won't take too long. Accepting differences, I think, is important. When you use the word impeding, that's the thing that comes to mind, and it's not a good place to be. So just, I'm trying to understand differences and acknowledging that just because things are done differently doesn't mean they're wrong. I think will take us a long way. With that said, though, I know I have one other person, Ato Salomon, or Mr. Salomon Seyum. If you could please condense your questions so that we can get to everyone, I would appreciate it. So, Mr. Salomon, to you, please.
Thank you, everyone. This is really a great event. My question is basically, I want to tie this to the current situation in Ethiopia. Right now, Ethiopia is under siege. Its throat is suffocated and it has been attacked by a homegrown terrorist group, and the international community, governments, reporters, major media outlets. Yesterday, Amnesty International, they just continued churning out one report of fabricated lie after another. And Ethiopians' witnesses, Ethiopian facts, Ethiopian truths, nobody cares. And it's like justice or truth doesn't matter at all. And we are totally confused. And sometimes we do think maybe there is some other issue that's being addressed. Could it be the water? Could it be Nile? And then when I hear Dr. Salomon talking about Lord Thomas in 1835, who said that they really needed a truly dominated nation, I'm thinking maybe the master switch is right there. Maybe nobody wants Ethiopia, the only independent Black African country, to be a success story and the wrong model for colored people all over the globe. Maybe there is a collusion or a deliberate mischief to dismantle or disable Ethiopian progress. Is there anything like that, or is my fear baseless? Thank you.
Thank you, Ato Salomon, for that. We're going to try and keep it to the celebration here, but I'm going to give somebody an opportunity to respond based on what was said just towards the end. And if you could please summarize your responses so we can give others opportunity, I would appreciate it. Who would want to go for it?
Those of you who have gone to school and studied history, world history, or so it says, Christianity the Western tradition. That's how it's taught. But really, before many Europeans were Christians, those who claim to teach us the Bible, who are sending missionaries to Africa, including to my birthplace, Ethiopia, never existed when Ethiopia became Christian. History is also vindicating Ethiopia. The oldest complete Bible is found at Abuna Yamata's, Deborah Damo, at Abuna Yamata's book. That had the 81 books that Ethiopia uses. Until the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, no Christian nation, including the Vatican, believed that the 81 chapters of the Bible were true. They say, these damn Africans, damn Ethiopians, this hodgepodge. No, history vindicator. Today, they are hunting the book of Enoch. Of course, they stole it. The first thief was James Bruce. And they are to get their hands on this thing. So what I'm trying to say is Ethiopia puts some of those who glorify themselves as guardians of Christianity to shame. Remember, Africa was colonized partly because many believed that they are bringing the light to the darkest continent. Ethiopian history challenges that. Ethiopia is a country that defeated colonialism. It's not color. It's not courage. It's not you are being superior or inferior. It's time and place and truth. The truth is that Ethiopia was a victim. The Italians were an aggressor. Always, always. Those who stand on falsehood will fail. Ethiopia's victory was because it's not attacking anybody. It was defending itself and defending for truth. So what I'm trying to say is when the Europeans, look, I showed you the clip. Ethiopianism has become a headache during colonialism. Ethiopianism is now becoming a headache in the 21st century. The Grand Renaissance Dam is another Adwa. Ethiopia is the only country in Africa who never took a penny from the European countries or anybody for loan to build this mega dam. Yet, until recently, Ethiopia was so much so associated with famine. The Oxford Dictionary had associated Ethiopia with famine because of what had happened in 1980s. But remember, Ethiopia gave aid to Europe. You go to the Netherlands, you will find a Deborah Brand Burdelips in the Museum of Netherlands. You go to Norway, the mighty Britain was given money by Haile Selassie after the war to save itself from troubles. Ethiopia supported Mexico during crisis. Ethiopia supported Libya and other countries when they were in need. But
Summarize,
Ethiopia
please.
was
Thank
always
you.
portrayed with famine, poverty, etc. So the Grand Renaissance Dam will lift up Ethiopia. When Ethiopia goes, Africa follows. Tomorrow, each and every African country will dam the river on its own without begging money from the international monetary fund or the whatever bank. That is what it means, Ethiopianism. They want to destroy that Ethiopianism. Of course, they always have someone, you see, a third party. There is a saying in Amharic, I'm sorry to take your time. Trees came together. It might not be beautiful as it's said in Amharic. All trees came and have a meeting. And they said, the axe is killing us.
we should stop doing, we should stop these acts. Then one wise tree said, well, it is not the axe. It was those who are bent and crooked who are serving the axe to cut us. This is what is happening. There are some crooked for some reason or another who are willing to serve foreign interest. Yes, if Ethiopia finished this down, indeed, as the name is coined, it's rebirth. But before it does that, it should be dismembered, dismantled. There are news agencies everywhere who are ganging up, churning out disinformation. Imagine, there are thousands of professors in the United States and even more in the diaspora. No news agency, be it the bullshit BBC and others, had tried to call and talk to. Who do they talk to? Those who are highly educated by virtue of their skin.
Please wrap up. Thank you.
Still is alive and thriving. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're not trying to be disrespectful, but we have to be respectful of everybody else this time. We're almost pushing it. I have a couple of people that I would like to give an opportunity. I'm going to go to, thank you, by the way, for that very passionate and compassionate response. Thank you so much. And the question was great too. I think I'm going to go to Abby, and then I have Ms. Ford. Then we will wrap up from there. If you could just summarize your questions and also your responses. That would be very helpful. Abby?
Thank you, Mommy. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. Self-awareness is a key element to harness the aspect of vision. And vision anchor the idea of freedom and self-realization. With that, to the panelists, you gentlemen, what do you have in mind to strengthen the connection between Africa and African-American history, especially using social media and other latest media networks? And I do believe to elevate Black excellence, it is so important to go back and revisit our history pragmatically. And that question goes to the panelists and to those who have history knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. I know it kind of got distorted, but I think we got it this time. Mr. Reed?
I just want to say, in the media business, we are looking at the opening of a dam of media control, and that is with 5G and what's happening in Africa. Africa is quickly catching up. We have to control our media. If we don't control the media, the lion story will never be told. It will always be the hunter stories told. And 2 years ago, I did a master's class in Addis, and I was telling them, you have about 2 to 3 years before Netflix or the major dominant company is going to come in and take over your media empire. One of the reasons that the stories coming out of Ethiopia about what's going on now are so geared is because no one controls the flow of media. Yeah. We must control our storytelling vehicles, and that is distribution. We've done enough over the years of being entertainers. It's now we have to control the message. It is our cultural propaganda that has to be told. And that is the only way it's going to be moved around the globe. We have to control that. Nigeria, Ghana, we have to control our media.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I know she's been waiting ever so patiently, so I'm going to come to you, Ms. Ford.
First of all, I think this is an awesome opportunity. I was invited by one of the young ladies that I fellowship with in we pass out free groceries. And so I don't really have a question as much as I have just a statement in how I'm appreciating this moment, because my prayer has been for the Africans and the African Americans to come together and understand their own history. And not only just that, but the aspect of, I deal with a lot of people from Africa, from Ethiopia all the way over to the west side of it. Learning my own identity, just found out my biological father, learned my history that I'm half Nigerian and I'm half Sierra Leone, Mindi tribe. And so the war that I see that takes place a lot in this particular part of the the Western Hemisphere is in the state of Washington, African Americans trying to connect with Africans. It's almost like a war because they've been told that we were thugs, this and that, you know, and kind of put us in a stereotype. And then on the flip side of it, you got African Americans that don't think they're African. And so I've been blessed to have the opportunity to have people like one of the ladies from Ethiopia to kind of help educate me. And then how to have, I do a Black coalition and bring in all the people in the room from different parts of the world. And so I really appreciate all the stuff that I'm hearing. And I heard you guys talking about different books, but there's another book that I'm reading that I find intriguing. It's called False Black Power. And it's a very empowering book. It's by a man named Jason L. Riley. And in the book, it's kind of just helping us identify ourselves, because a lot of the African Americans are starting to wake up and realize our history, and we're finding out our roots. And I'm just grateful for just to hear this information and just to be filled up. You know, I work with a lot of the people from Africa. I ship clothes in different parts of the world of Africa. Matter of fact, I just sent a big container over to Senegal, and I don't have just a, you know, anywhere, you know, as far as just one place. I'm shipping as I'm led by God, because that's how I roll. But I want to thank you guys all for just sharing the knowledge and the empowerment to one another, and seeing African Americans being involved with Africans, because it's so important. And I tell a lot of people, you're coming from Africa. We African Americans actually need your education, just like you need some of the help and the guidelines how to survive in America as a person of color. But what's the difference is, those of us that are African American are not attacked, or should I say African, are not attacked as the African Americans are when we're in groups. And I'm seeing the difference because of how they carry themselves versus how we carry ourselves, and the diversity in the midst of that. But I wanted to thank you guys for sharing this. I'm not going to stay on there long, you know, because we got a lot of noise going back and forth. I own a store too, so I'm shipping stuff out and trying to get stuff in order. But I really want to say thank you. I was invited by a lady named from Ethiopia, and I love her very much. I appreciate her. She's really taught me a lot, and it's just an honor. And I thank you guys for what you're doing.
Thank you. And it is an honor to have you here. And I think you've touched a lot of pertinent points, and having this kind of dialogue and this kind of networking and connecting probably is the most essential and needed things. And I see it on the chat too. Somebody had suggested that more interaction between Africans and African Americans probably could get to a lot of the things that is being said. If I could ask for forgiveness and steal a couple more minutes. I know I'm about to say somebody's name wrong. Is it Yuda or Uda? Can I give her 1 minute to ask question? Because I think that could be the very last one. If you can just ask real quick, and then we'll see if, I don't know if it's a question or a comment that you have, but if you can go ahead, and then that would we'll make that the last question for tonight.
I wanted to thank everybody for coming. Baba, Dr. Dev, Rod, Corin, the Linda James, Dr. Linda James. Thank you, everyone. This is more of a comment than a question. I am a policy counselor, licensed counselor. So historically, what mankind has been going through is all mankind, not just Ethiopia or African Americans. This is mankind overall. We've been pushed more and more towards protectorate state, which is exactly what happened with Battle of Adwa too, when Italy said you have to get our permission before you could make any kind of treaty with any other country. Humankind individually and at large, we've been pushed towards that kind of process. And understanding these policies, how we got there, and then it's been reverse engineered from where our ancestors were. And now we have to understand how to reverse engineer what we have lost in terms of our rights, sovereignty, and solidarity as a human nation, not just as a black or white or that's created politically. And there's a number of us who've been working in this arena for a very, very long time. Maybe this is an era and time that we must unite, put our nose together, and create that salvation that mankind has been seeking for a very long time. And thank you for putting this forum together.
Thank you so very much. I think that really wraps up what we've been trying to do all evening as we celebrate. We do need to come together. It is high time that as a continent, we do come together. It's not even the Africans and the African Americans, even the continent of Africa needs to start coming together because we're just dismantled. As we're working with the African American brothers and sisters here, we should also work towards the unity that Africa, the continent of Africa should show. So thank you for that comment. I think I've taken enough time. I'm just going to read one statement and then I'm going to pass it on to Meredith for the remainder of the time. This is what I would like to leave you guys with. It says the preservation of peace and the guaranteeing of man's basic freedom and rights require courage and eternal vigilance. Courage to speak and act, and if necessary, to suffer and die for truth and justice. Eternal vigilance that the least transgression of international morality shall not go undetected and unreminded. With that, I am going to bring Meredith back. Thank you so very much for humoring me and allowing me to co-host this event. Thank you so very much.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mamie. So I trust that everyone got something valuable out of our gathering here today and that it encourages us to study further. There was so much more that could be shared, I'm sure. I believe the presentation from Dr. Getahon will be made available after this some kind of way. I don't know if the embassy can send it out or you can put it into the chat. I did share my poem in the chat. You're welcome to that. So now we'll have our closing remarks from His Excellency Ambassador Mulugeta Keleo, Consul General of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Ambassador, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Brother Meredith and Mamai Worku, Master of Ceremony of the Day, that you gave me the chance to give a closing remark. Before that, the presenter somehow changed my mind to change my profession to historian. You know, the victory of the Battle of Adwa makes me proud to be African, while many countries were being subsumed by the Western colonization. Our African brothers and sisters fought hard against those dark times. And because of the willingness of the country's people, from pastoralists, artisans, farmers, local lords, the kings, coming together as one, and it is with its geographic isolation and economic challenge, the Battle of Adwa helped Africa score decisive victories against a series of colonist forces after news of an African victory should spread throughout the world. Adwa turned Ethiopia into the symbol of redemption and freedom for Black people. Adwa connected Black people with Africa's ancient glory and future hope. Lastly, I want to say thank you, Dr. Salomon Getahon and Dr. Shimelis Bonsa, for your devoted time, the talent, and the experience you have given to the audience about the victory of Adwa, the victory of Ethiopia, the victory of Africa, and Africa's history and its politics. You gave us a valuable presentation that awakens Africans to stand together. A big thank you to Mr. Meredith Bell and Mama Yorku for your dedication and continued support for this kind of event in our Consulate General every time. You made everyone feel connected, even though we haven't physically attended the event. If God allows, by next year, physically we'll celebrate together with having of delicious Ethiopian food and cultural drinks. Again, I thank everyone that has contributed this event, including our diplomats and the big audience, the African American celebrity, the professionals, the big audience that have joined today. Will complete our dam, the great Renaissance Dam. God bless Africa and United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is a very amazing event. We are so thankful to all participants, presenters, and speakers, and all coordinators. Particularly, I would like to thank my brother Meredith and Mame, including our learned professors. God bless you. Have a good night.
And also let us thank our Zoom tech, Mr.
Yes.
Ishmael Asaba, Ishmael Ngu,
Absolutely.
from Cameroon.
Please.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And everyone from the Consulate's office for putting something like this together and giving us the opportunity. Thank you so very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mami.